Okay, so when this news of the brainwashing, when it reached Srila Prabhupada, now this term was a totally new term to Srila Prabhupada. In fact, it's funny, even today, in the year 2021, go into Google Translate and just drop in the word brainwashing, and guess what Google is going to translate it as? It'll be funny. It says dimag dhona. Literally dimag dhona. That is what is brainwashing, a literal translation. And that's what Srila Prabhupada understood this as. He said, oh, brainwashing, yes, this is exactly what we are doing, right? Because their brains are filled with all kinds of garbage. We are actually washing their brains, right? So as funny as it sounds, well, in a sense, this is what we are going to do here in this course, right? Literally, we are going to wash our heads, wash our minds, right? And that's what this whole detox program is about. So in this course, we are going to take up the subject on mental detox from three perspectives, mainly centering around the yogic and the Vedic scriptures. But we're going to take it up in three levels. So over a period of 3 weeks, we'll have three different sessions. The first session, just today's session, we're going to talk more about mental detox itself. In the next session, we're going to talk more about emotional detox. We're taking things a little more deeper. And in the third week, we're going to talk what is called as spiritual detox, right? So this is going to be the rough outline of what you'll be going through in the next few weeks, right? So today we'll introduce this concept of mental detox and what it is about, right? So if you go back to understand the concept of mind and what this mental detox is, let's switch the clock back by a couple of hundred of years. And there was a French philosopher and a mathematician, Rene Descartes. When he said that I think therefore I am, he became immortal with that statement, right? As good a philosophy as it sounds, it did create a lot of problems for us, because with that statement of Descartes, he literally split the body and mind for all time to come, at least in the modern science, right? Today, modern medicine, following the footsteps of Descartes, it looks at the body and the mind as these two independent entities, right? As if, and the whole perspective, like all modern sciences, which is very much in line with that systemic thinking. Systemic thinking means where you're trying to divide everything into boxes, right? That's how our modern education is also, right? So there is a field for science, there's a field for mathematics, there's field for arts, right? We don't like to integrate things. We don't like to mix art and mathematics, right? Or some grammar and physics, right? So we like to look at the world into boxes. And this systemic thinking has also divided modern medicine also, to the point where not only have the body and mind have been seen as two separate entities, but even within this body, we have so successfully divided the body into different elements, into different subsystems, right? Which means if I have a problem with my eye, right, I will not go to somebody who's connected to the study of the endocrine system of your body, or something to do with the lungs in your body, right? So there's a specific doctor. There are different departments of each medicine. There are different doctors holding different departments, right? And this has created, it did help us in a lot of ways. Today we are able to address the problems of the individual parts of the body, but it is also creating a bigger challenge in terms of certain unsolvable medical issues. And not only that, the side effects that it is having on how treating one part of the body is affecting some other part, right? And within this field of modern medicine, there is a kind of a rebel group, right, which is called as psychoneuroimmunology, right? Just the name itself is so telling. It says so much, right? It's about immunology is, we understand our body has to have certain immunity to fight diseases, right? And much of the understanding until this point has been that there are certain, so the WBCs, the white blood corpuscles in our body that helps in, we study this in high school biology and high school science, that how this is what that gives immunity to the body, right? And this is how we get the ability to fight diseases. But this whole new field has added a neuropsychological component to body's immunity system, which means what it is saying is that your ability to fight diseases and remain in a state of balance is not just a physical ability, but it is also a psychological ability, right? This is very groundbreaking, right? In fact, there's a wonderful book in this regard. If anybody wants to get more information, it's called as Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. She's a in fact, she's won many awards for her groundbreaking work. And when she first proposed her concept, it got a lot of vehement opposition from the medical fraternity, right? So what, in essence, is a very exhaustive and quite a technical book. But if you were to summarize what she is essentially trying to, or what her research was, right, what she says is that, there are different cells in our body, each one functioning in different ways, right? Like, for example, we have cells of the liver, right? They are functioning in a certain way. They have a very, very specific task in the body, right? There are certain cells called as muscular cells. They have a particular task that they have to perform, right? And there are certain cells called the optical nerves and so on, right? The retina, for example, is also comprised of cells. They have a very specific function, right? Now, all the while we'll be looking at them separately, but what she says is, it is finally the brain which is controlling all of this. How is the brain able to do? How is the brain able to, uh, trigger certain optimum functioning of these different of varieties of functions, variety functional cells in our body? So she says that there are certain regulators, certain inhibitors, right, which the brain releases in the form of these peptides. Peptides are simple protein, proteins that the body produces, which is what the brain is releasing. So these peptides, she calls them, these are the communication channels between the brain and the rest of the organs of the body, right? And she explains that how that these cells don't look at them as some autonomous mechanical units, like, as if some kind of a lifeless unit, that if you provide food, it does its work and then it moves on with its function, right? No, it's not exactly like that. Even these cells, they exhibit life. There is life in every cell of our body. This is so synonymous with, or so much it resonates with the Vedic thought process that says that how the prana is distributed throughout the body, right? And we'll come back to the concept of prana a little later in our discussion today. So literally what this groundbreaking research says is that these peptides, they define the mood of your body, of every cell in your body, right? What literally, when I use the word mood, right, take it in the literal sense of what it means to us, right? So which means when you are in a good mood, right, if I give you your most favorite food, you may not necessarily eat it, right? And if you are in a or even if you are in a very good mood, no matter what you get, you kind of adjust with it and you consume that, right? So this is how even the cells in our body, they function. So when your brain releases these negative mood peptides, the cells in your body, every cell in your body starts experiencing that negativity, right? What implications does all this have? Why did we start with this whole biology class here all of a sudden, right? This is the point here. What this groundbreaking research shows is that even if you give your body the most nutritious food, the cells in your body may not accept it. Why? Because they are not in a good mood. Why? Because your mind is not in a good mood. And this is where we dare introduce the concept of mind in a modern context. Because in the modern medicine, in the modern science, there is no mind, there is only the brain. But this work shows it that how every cell in our body, right, uh, is experiencing some mood, which means the mind, which we are trying to detox today, is something that is distributed all over your body. It is not just here, but it is there even in the tip of your finger. Your mind exists even here. Your mind exists even the tip of the little toe of your left foot, right? That is how your mind is distributed all over your body. So which means that when our when an individual cell, it is experiencing some kind of quote unquote depression, that is how we become susceptible to disease, right? So this is a whole new take on what diseases are, what well-being is, right? Which means the cells in our body, they can also store the various experiences that we undergo. Like for example, when we say happiness or pain, right, these are some of the experiences that we go through, certain feelings that we carry. Every cell in your body stores it in the form of memory, which means our brain is not the only storage space that we have, but these emotions, these feelings, these memories are distributed throughout your body. That is what we call as the mind in the yogic context, right? So this is such a synchrony that we are experiencing now between our own uh, body mind connect, that even modern science is now coming to such a synonymous understanding, right? And this understanding is going to be very important for us if we really want to go through a mental detox, right? Because in the past 5 days or so since you began this detox course, you have been going through a lot of physical detox, right? But do not think that this is just eating good food, eating timely food, avoiding the unnecessary foods or the unhealthy foods is not just creating a sense of physical well-being, but is also going to help you and create a lot of mental well-being. In fact, believe it or not, even just these few days of mental detox, the physical detox, right, even one day of physical detox heightens the awareness of your own body, right? And this is the whole rationale behind certain traditional practices like fasting, right? In the Vedic context, we use this word called as tapasya or tapas, right? What is this tapas? Tapas is not some kind of physical abnegation. It's not some kind of forced giving up of some things, but rather it is voluntarily accepting some kind of austerity for the sake of a higher purpose, right? And this tapas, how Patanjali also in the Yoga Sutras, how he defines the benefit of this tapas, he says kaya shuddhi. It creates, he talks about how there are various blockages in our body, right? And exactly what, if you read that book Molecules of Emotion also, what it says is when there are these negative peptides that which the cells attract, your cells start blocking any kind of nutrition which is being supplied to it, right? And these blockages, how do I remove these blockages? Patanjali gives us the answer. Of course, that book doesn't give an answer. It just says you have to be happy, but how to be happy is a very, very subjective thing. But if you refer to our traditional sciences, tapas is that means by which we are able to unlock these blockages at a cellular level, right? And this is how we learn to heighten our own awareness of our own body, right? At least at a physical level, you will see, you'll start feeling good, you'll start feeling fresh, right? Just avoiding some of those forbidden foods, will give you that. In Sanskritam it is called as virya, tejas, ojas. These are the words that are used, the vigor and vitality which you experience, right? And that also creates a sense of mental well-being, right? So physical fasting, staying physical detox also goes a long way in creating a platform for that mental detox, right? So now we see how closely these two concepts are connected, right? So imagine you actually have some kind of a very subtle x-ray machine with you, by which you can actually see what is happening inside your body and mind. And all this kind of junk that we are filling into our body has actually blocked the operation of that x-ray machine. And now with just few days of following proper diet, few days of following a sattvic diet, and that's how the word sattva is defined in the Bhagavad Gita also. It says what sattva does, it says it illuminates the body and the mind. What do you mean by illuminating? It's not that you start glowing and you don't need any of those cosmetics anymore. What illumination means is that awareness, that cognizance of your own body, right? So this x-ray machine is now turned on. Finally we have cleaned up that x-ray machine, and now your body is ready to go deeper, right? So we are ready to start this detox program, right? So we are going to go through a few set of exercises, 4 exercises today, that will help us address this whole program of detoxing our mental body, right? So what exactly is this toxicity that we are trying to address? So what, when we use the word detox, it literally means that we are trying to purge out something toxic in our body, right? So what is it which is toxic in our mind, right? So this Patanjali very beautifully, in fact that's the very defining sutra in the Yoga Sutras. He uses the term called as chitta vrittis, right? What are the chitta vrittis? Vritti literally means something that is in a constant motion, right? Like the waves, for example, right? So something that is a constant flux, constantly moving, constantly agitated, right? Which means something that never can remain in balance, right? But which is constantly fluctuating in its very state of existence, right? This fluctuations in the mind or is what is called as chitta vrittis, and that chitta vritti is what Patanjali calls as this toxicity that we are carrying in our mind. And to nirodha, to eliminate that toxicity, is the goal of yoga. That is how he defines yoga in the very beginning of the book. He says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Literally means is yoga means mental detox in our language of this course, right? So so then what are these vrittis then? One of We are not going to the technicalities of what the vrittis are, but one of the vrittis that he talks about is memory. Memory is also one of the vrittis, right? You may think, hey, memories are good, it helps me remember, it helps me answer my exams, it helps me remember my passwords, my bank account passwords, my ATM pin, it helps me remember names, right? And so on. But this is not the kind of memory we are talking about, right? So this is how, in one of the beauties of this book, of all Vedic scriptures but more so of the Yoga Sutras, is that every term that Patanjali introduces, he gives a proper definition as well. And this is how he defines the word vritti. He says, defines the term memory or smriti. He says, Anubhuta Vishaya asampramoshaha smritihi. Right? Let's break it down. Anubhuta Vishaya Asampramoshaha Smritihi. So Anubhuta, Anubhuti, we know this word, right? Even in many Indian languages, we use this term. Anubhuti means an experience or some kind of a perception that we had. So we go through a lot of life experiences every day, lot of anubhutis we have. Some we remember and some we think we have forgotten, but Patanjali says, no, you don't forget it. Your conscious state may forget it, but subconsciously you are storing all of this, right? Anubhuta Vishaya means the objects of perception around us. So Anubhuta Vishaya Asampramoshaha. Pramosha means to literally slip away, right? So he says, asampramoshaha means to not slip away something, means to retain something. Just like water, when you put it on a slope, it just glides down and slips away. But if you create some kind of a dam, it's the water is stored. The smriti is the dam. Memory function of our mind is like those dams that we create for all our life experiences, right? And this memory, where is it? Not just here, but as we discussed, everywhere. Which means not only are we storing all those happy, jolly memories, but our body is a repository of lot of pain. It is a repository of lot of regret. It is a repository of lot of sadness. All these negative emotions that we experience are also deposited in our body, right? And this smriti function, this vritti, this toxic vritti that we carry, chitta vritti that we carry, is actually holding on to that, right? Now, of course, vritti can also be good. Patanjali also defines it. Before he defines the vrittis, he says vrittaya, they can be klishta or aklishta, which means they can be favorable or unfavorable. So when you are holding on to positive memories, that is a good function of the cells or good function of the memory of our body. But along with dam, so if you send clean water in the dam becomes a source of clean drinking water for the rest of the year. But if you send lot of toxic water into the dam also becomes a repository of the toxic water, which can contaminate. Even the more time it stays, it can also contaminate the fresh water which is already stored in the dam, right? See, this is how negativity affects us, right, on a physical level also. So this smriti, the aklishta smriti or the detrimental smriti, what it does, memory, what it does, it holds on to these experiences and the negative experiences and stores them in our body. So this is going to be the first exercise that we will do now, right? Now that your X-ray machine is on, finally we have cleaned that X-ray machine to whatever level you have activated it in this 5 days of physical detox. Let's do a little exercise now of trying to scan our memory. We are going to do a memory scanning now. If you run any of those antivirus softwares, the first thing that they do is they do a memory scan. Before they start scanning your hard disk, they first do a memory scan. So we are going, before we go into our hard disk are like deep rooted things that we will address at a later point. But let's first do a memory scan, right? So what is that memory? We said our body, right? So we're going to do a memory scan of our body, right? So this is going to be our first challenge, right? So what I will request you is try to situate yourself in a nice comfortable posture, right? If you are not already in a very comfortable posture, if you are in a very awkward position right now physically, right, try to situate yourself in a nice comfortable posture, preferably with your back straight. If you can sit cross footed, nothing like it. If not, try to rest your feet on the ground so that there is no unnecessary strain on your knees or on your or on the thighs, so that your body is a more relaxed position, right? Now at this point, I request you to close your eyes, right? Please close your eyes and try to start sensing your body. Try to experience every limb of your body. Right now, you are doing an X-ray of your body. Try to sense any unnoticed pain in your body. It could be in your shoulder or the neck. Sometimes people experience pain in their an unnoticed pain in their knees or calf muscles. Or sometimes people may experience this unnoticed pain along their spine. Or even at a more basic level, you may experience some uneasiness in your guts, in your intestine, in your stomach, in your abdomen, in the area around your navel. Right. So now that you have identified some pain, right, now try to breathe some prana into that particular part of your body. Just take a nice deep inhalation and visualize that you're directing that breath to that affected part of your body. And as you're exhaling out very deeply, visualize that you're releasing that pain from that part of your body. Repeat this at least 3 times. All right. So whenever you are ready, you can open your eyes again, and let's bring ourselves back to this class. Right. So this is going to be the first mental challenge that I have to offer you, which is that you will learn, you will practice this body scanning regularly and learn to identify the pain body of yours, right? Sometimes it could be multiple places in your body, right? And we become so inert to this default pain. We start thinking this is default, right? And transformation begins by challenging the default. And this is where you're challenging your own physical default here. So learn to identify the pain which is in your body. And for that, you need to become more physically aware, right? It's even better if you can lie down. That's a whole point in Shavasana. Those of you who are more experienced with yogic practices, asana practices, this is what we do during Shavasana, which the great yogacharyas, they say this is the most difficult among all the asanas, right? All those Instagram asanas that we see, they are not the difficult ones. But if you really want to effectively, perfectly do the shavasana, that's the most difficult among all the asanas, because you have to heighten your state of awareness throughout your body, right? So do this exercise regularly, right? And try to become more comfortable in identifying the pain in your own body. Do not be afraid, right? Because as you start to sense the pain, it also can trigger certain emotional pain. But we will address that in our next week's discussion. but at least learn to identify that pain, at least know where it is, right? So this is the first challenge that we will take up. The Some of you might have had some difficulty in doing this exercise. You may have felt that I'm not able to sense any pain. It is so difficult. When I try to close my eyes, my mind is constantly distracted by the sounds around me, or maybe the smells around me. I'm not able to turn inwards. So don't worry, it takes a bit of practice, right? But to really master this awareness of the body, and to really understand this whole concept of how the mind is distributed right throughout this body, we need to understand the one very very radical concept, right? And please note this down with bold letters in your notebook, right? Okay, this is what I'm going to say now. That radical concept is that we are our bodies. Yes, you heard it right. We are our bodies. And some of you may be thinking, what? After all these years, this is what I'm hearing, right? Something totally opposite. All the while, we've been hearing from spiritual discourses that you are not this body, you are not this body. And what is this Prabhuji saying here, right? Has he gone crazy? Has he flipped, right? What is this? Yes, we are our bodies, right? Not in the sense that we are literally our bodies, but if you really want to become self realized, it begins with self awareness. And that awareness, to become cognizant of your own awareness, that awareness is spread throughout your body, right? The Upanishads very beautifully highlight this concept, where they explain that how that one absolute reality, that one absolute truth, it provides this ability called as consciousness to the soul, and distributes it across the various sections or various parts of its physical existence, right? Which means the soul has consciousness as its function, right? As its very you can say energy, so to speak, right? But this consciousness of the soul, it manifests in various physical aspects, which means when the soul wants to express its will, it expresses it through the intelligence. The will of the soul manifests through the intelligence. When the soul wants to express its desire, the desire of the soul manifests through the mind, right? When the soul wants to express a particular action, that action of the soul, whatever it wants to act, it manifests through its physical organs, through the senses, through the knowledge acquiring senses, and through the action oriented senses organs, right? That is also, it is all happening through this body, right? And when the soul wants to experience certain emotions, it does it to the medium of the prana, right? In fact, this prana is literally synonymous with the consciousness of the soul. Certain Upanishads also equate the prana. Of course, this is not the five pranas that we study in the Vedic text, but we are talking about something called as Mukhya Prana, or there's a chief prana, which is the source of all these five pranas, and that literally comes from the jiva. That is how the Upanishads explain this. The Prashna Upanishad talks about this in its 6th chapter. It talks about how this prana is actually coming from the very consciousness of the soul itself. So the point behind this explanation that we said, that how the intelligence, the mind, the senses, and the prana, they are the way the soul expresses its awareness, right? So which means, why are we then not able to see it properly? Because of all the clogging in these channels of awareness, all this material toxicity which has clogged this awareness, right? And that is what we are trying to detox through this program, right? So as we go deeper in our understanding of the mind, a very important concept that we need to understand, right, is that how mind creates our version of reality. Our perceptions create the reality around us. This is also a very a tricky concept to understand, because we think, hey, what do you mean by perceptions create reality? I see a wall in front of me, I see a wall around me, that wall is real. What do you mean by my mind is imagining a wall there? It's not that you are imagining a mind, but the experience of how what that wall means to you is what is defined by the mind, right? I'll give a little funny incident that happened in my own life, right? So back in my academic years during my engineering days, right? So back in the days, internet was not so common, right? So when exam results had to come out, so of course the detailed mark sheet was how many marks you got in each subject, they all used to come later. Today, instantly you get everything online, right? But back in those days, the university used to send a marks list printout, and the printout used to be kept in our departments and so on, right? So on one such after one such semester exam, and we got to know the results are out, right? I all me and all my friends, there's like a big mad rush that time to go look, check out the notice board. I don't know if any of you grew up in that generation there. That's a whole experience. Today you guys in the online age are deprived of that thrill of running through the corridor of your campus and you know slamming into someone else at the notice board, and pushing people apart to look at your results. So right. So anyway, and because it was so crowded, I had to like literally steer through people and check out my roll number and check out my marks. So it turns out that I flunked in 2 subjects, right? That's what the result said. And I was totally devastated. My head was reeling in disbelief, and I like shocked completely. And when you're in that kind of a state, your blood somehow becomes very hot. My face became completely red, and I was like, what? I'm the topper of my department, and how did I flunk in 2 subjects? And this is so shocking. And the person, I think my roll number was 202 or something like that, right? And the person 203 was not so academically oriented person, and that guy also saw his result, and he said, yeah man, life is cool, I flunked in 2 subjects. And I like, okay, forget about you flunking, but I flunked in 2 subjects. This is such a embarrassment, of course, at egoistic level, but it was unbelievable for me because I was expecting very good marks. Then when I heard that this guy also flunked in 2 subjects, I checked the result again. So somehow I didn't, it was a mistake on my part. Actually, when I was checking the result, I saw my roll number, but I saw one row below that, how many subjects. So I saw his result and my roll number, and I somehow mismatched the whole result. And when I saw, I cleared all the subjects. So then suddenly all the anxiety, all my whatever boiling face, all of that disappeared, right? Years later, when I look back at this incident, right, I look back at with lot of look at it in a humorous way, but also in a very philosophical way, because this incident has taught me that our in those few minutes when I was a failure or whatever, I perceived myself as a failure, the world was such a hostile place, the world was such a uneasy place for me. And the moment I realized that I have cleared all the subjects, the world became beautiful again, right? So what is beauty and what is ugly, what is hostile, what is friendly, these are perceptions that our mind creates, right? So the approach which the Vedic sciences take, when it comes to these concepts like mental detox, that's where we are coming back to again, is that, we cannot change the world around us, but we can definitely change the world inside of us. We can change our perceptions, we can change our responses to the world, and that changing of the world within is changing of our mind, right? Oftentimes I see today this has become, even more rampant, because individualism is such a cherished value in our modern society today, right? And I see, as an output of this individualism comes this very strong tendency where people are constantly complaining, because constantly complaining about the world around them. This is not right, that is not right, this pandemic could have been handled this way, this vaccination could have been handled that way, my neighbor could have behaved in this way, this and that. Literally we have complaints about the whole world, right? And oftentimes the mind enjoys this complaining. Why? Because the more you worry about improving the world outside of you, it is a perfect excuse for the mind to not improve the world inside of you, right? Too much worrying about changing the world and improving the world and revolutionizing the world, etc. Oftentimes it gives our mind the perfect excuse to not change ourselves. As the famous statement or a saying goes, you spot it, you got it. Meaning, the more problems we see around us, actually we are reflecting our own inner problems on the outside world. Just think about it. I'm not giving a very hypothetical philosophy here. Just think about a little child. Think about the innocence of a little child, where the child learns to trust everything around them, right? And when you take uh, something valuable from the child by default thinks that yes, this person is going to return it back to me after they are done exploring it or looking at it or whatever. Even it could be the most precious jewel or whatever or whatever their favorite toy, you know the child thinks that yeah, they're going to return it back to me. Ask yourself this question: will you behave the same way with some random stranger? Right, just like how a child trusts a stranger, will you do that? Will you give your own something valuable to that person? Right? No, because we are convinced that this person is going to steal it. Why? Because we ourselves somewhere we have the tendency, or at least we are fully aware that I can steal something from someone. The concept of stealing exists, right? Either because unfortunately we have been the victims of such a thing in the past, right? We will come to that also later on. Or we ourselves may have that kind of a crooked nature. If you are not crooked, it's you will not superimpose that crooked nature on others and start looking at everyone with that lens of maybe this person is crooked or this person is crooked, right? So you spot it, you got it. In fact, many times this this tendency is a bigger problem than the external problem itself. This complaining tendency, or this looking at people, superimposing our mental thought patterns on others, is actually a bigger problem than the external problem itself, right? So this is a very important thing that we need to purge out of our system, right? So I'm going to give you a nice challenging and yet fun exercise for all of you, right? This is something that you can do when until we meet next time. So probably about a week you can practice this, right? Take a piece of paper and start writing down all the complaints your mind has, right? Maybe if you feel a piece of paper is not going to be sufficient, take a book, it's okay, right? But start writing down the complaints, whatever, every time you feel, like for example, why did this particular team lose the match, this guy messed up in the last minute, right? If you have a complaint like that, write it down, right? Start writing down all these complaints, right? And uh, and start, once you make a list of all these complaints, then you will see after some time, or maybe after a day or two, when you look back at that complaint, you will see it was never an issue. It was not such a big issue at, in the first place. Somehow in that moment, your mind has magnified the negative to such an extent that that issue has become the number one problem in your life, right? So learn to now start writing down the problems and start looking at them in a very trivial way. You don't even have to force yourself. You yourself will start looking at your life problems with in a such a trivializing way, like that, right? And not just that, right? Also, start writing down certain happy moments, right? So that you are not only just focusing on the negative aspects, but also focus on the positive aspects, right? So we'll come to that as that exercise also a little later. So the first exercise that we will do is that we will start writing down every time I feel very strongly, right? Not just trivial ones, of course. At that moment, if it's trivial, definitely it's going to be trivial later on. But something that you feel is very strongly, maybe your friend said something to you which he or she should not have said. Write it down, right? And then make a list of that and reflect back on those. So one thing that you will see is some problems will just fizz out. They will no more be an issue after 2 days, and you're wondering why the hell was my consciousness occupied on this, right? Once you start seeing that, you will learn to you will develop that ability to trivialize that complaint right at the beginning, right? That is a strength that you will develop. Another thing you will notice is that you are constantly complaining about the same issue. Your mind finds creative ways of expressing the same issue in multiple ways, and many times that issue is perhaps you not getting sufficient attention, right? Something centered around something egoistic around some identity of yours, it becomes the center of that issue, right? So try to identify these patterns, because we're going to use these patterns in dealing with our emotional and spiritual detox. So just this is just a logging exercise. Just by logging it, you will start feeling better. If sometimes some people find it difficult to even express their complaints, at least by doing so, you are releasing it out. You're not letting the memory of your body hold on to it. At least you are purging it out by writing it on a piece of paper. And two, many of them you will see, majority of them you will see are trivial issues. So you will start transcending those problems. And three, you should start seeing a pattern in them, and that pattern we are going to analyze it in our next week's discussion, right? So that's about the complaining of the mind, right? But some complaints you will see are very, at least at that point you may feel these are very, very genuine, right? And you will start feeling so critical about that situation which led to that complaint, or you may start feeling critical about that person who caused that kind of a situation, or led to that complaint, right? So the most critical tool tip for us here is that if you really want to stop feeling bad about these complaints, you should stop feeding bad. To stop feeling bad, you should stop feeding bad into your system, which means stop brooding over it again and again and again, right? This is a pattern, because another nature of the mind is it works like a sponge. It always likes to absorb things, right? And it also tries to absorb both positive and negative emotions, like the memory function that we were talking about. On a physical level, it deposits it in the form of pain. In the mental level, it tries to go through this whole cyclical thought pattern, right? So if you really want to stop feeling bad, You need to stop feeding this bad stuff into your mind, right? And you may say, you know, but how can I, it was a very genuine, somebody genuinely did something bad to you. How can I just say it is not bad? This is very superficial, right? We are not even talking about this kind of superficial positivity, right? This ability will come gradually, but at least start acting on it. At least, even if you feel it's a superficial thing, start acting on it superficial way. Even if you feel you have been wronged, right? Or even if you feel that somebody else is wrong, right? You don't have to feel wrong about it, right? Because many times deep down, that inability to accept those situations, many times it comes from our inability to accept ourselves, right? These so-called wrongs, this so-called bad feeling, this so-called negative emotions, right? It becomes difficult for us to accept those things, not because they are, these external things are genuinely wrong, but because somewhere deep down we have an inability to accept something about ourselves. This is where the deep rooted emotional side of ourselves comes out, and which, like I said, we will take it up in a more deeper discussion next week, right? So what, at least what is, before we deal with the positive, before we add the positive, at least we need to purge out the negative. So this is the second challenge which I'm offering all of you, or rather the third challenge that I'm offering you today, right? Which is a very very difficult one. This is perhaps the most challenging thing which even I myself fail many times, but I humbly, very earnestly put it across to all of you, right? Take up a challenge to not criticize any person for the next 1 week, right? Don't criticize anyone for the next 1 week, right? It could be, and of course this can happen at multiple levels. At least avoid verbal or physical criticism. Don't bring it out. If you feel you are in your mind, you are being critical of someone, if you can avoid that, good. But at least don't bring it out in words. Try not to criticize someone. Why? Because we want to stop feeding the bad into our systems, right? If even mentally you may be feeding that, but once you bring it out, it becomes a more deep rooted, a deep seated thing, because every action, it creates a very strong impression in our psyche. So for next 1 week, at least on a physical level, if possible on a mental level, we will not criticize anyone, right? Do you feel the challenges are getting difficult, right? So don't worry, you will, think things will get easier with practice, right? And and sometimes you will feel that these mental burdens that we are carrying, they end up creating a lot of inner triggers and inner distractions that prevent us from focusing on our life goals, right? That sometimes you genuinely want to accomplish something. You maybe want to study something, or you want to cook something, or you want to work on some kind of a presentation or something like that. And the pain that is there in our body and mind, right? It starts to trigger a lot of distractions, right? And of course, not accomplishing our task is one thing, but we end up starting to feel very bad about ourselves, right? We go through some kind of a toxic negative state internally, right? So understand that this is a, let's just be a little kind with ourselves. Understand that you can't solve this problem immediately overnight, right? Understand that at least I cannot control how I'm feeling right now, but at least I have some level of control on my physical actions, right? The Bhagavad Gita in the third chapter gives a very beautiful hierarchy of our faculties. Lord Krishna explains that the soul is the most, it is the topmost in the hierarchy of our cognizance. Below that soul is our intelligence, and that soul controls that intelligence. The intelligence controls the mind. The mind, in turn, it controls the senses, right? So, which means the soul, it controls our understanding controls our thoughts and feelings, our thoughts and feelings, they control our actions. Now somebody who's studying this hierarchy will naturally say, oh, which means if I want to fix my life, I need to go to the top. If I press the top button, everything else down the line falls into place, right? Wrong. That is not what Lord Krishna talks about. He says, start working on the senses, right? Why? Because that is a low hanging fruit. Because you cannot immediately work on the soul with a troubled mind and a distracted intelligence. But physical actions, being lower in the hierarchy, are relatively easy to control. Even with a little